So as for those of you planning events, even those of you who have planned events, small and large, you know there's always something that you haven't thought of. And so after a certain point, everything that you think of next just adds to the experience, adds to the efficiency, reduces the problems. And so what we have is a panel of experts who are going to talk about events and event planning. So even if you've been deep in event planning, you absolutely will take something away from this session. So our first presenter is Jennifer Gallo from Gallo Event Agency in Rochester, New York. She is planning the Rochester Museum and Science Center's 4-day Rock the Eclipse Festival. We have Jessica Morgan, and Haley Isbell from the city of Sweetwater, Tennessee, with some case studies, I believe, essentially on that. Ben Weehee from Science Festival Alliance and MIT Museum, and Tia Weiss from Main Street America, getting ready for the Great American Solar Eclipse. And then we will have some tips from Ian Lauer on accommodating the astrophotographers that are going to want to show up at your event, how to make that special for them. With no further ado, Jen, please.
All right, I got to start my timer too. So like Deb said, I'm Jen Gallo with Gallo Event Agency out of Rochester, New York. I'm really excited to be here today and go over preparing for totality, tips for planning a large scale event. So for the event planners out here, this might seem straightforward and obvious to you, but for those of you who don't normally plan events, I'm hoping you leave here with a few new tips. Okay. So a little bit about my agency and the experience that got me to speak here today, just for background information. I am in large scale event planning. So this is not weddings for those of you out there. I don't do weddings. But large scale events, I primarily oversee the Cornhill Arts Festival in Rochester, New York. And for those of you who don't know what that is, it is a 2-day arts festival with 400 artists, 4 music stages, 2 beer and wine gardens, and plenty of family-friendly activities. It brings in roughly 150,000 people over the 2 days. This year, too, working with Dan and Deb, we also had an eclipse art category. So that had about 50 artists that had some sort of artwork that was eclipse related. And then Deb and Dan and a few others went around and judged those, and we selected a winner. And then they were presented with a prize as well. So another way we partner together in Rochester. On the other side of it, I also do on-site brand activations, most recently working with Galbani Cheese, the official cheese of the Buffalo Bills. So go Bills, anyone out there? Thank you. But this allows me to see the other side of it from a vendor perspective and take those lessons as a vendor participating in events back to the large scale events I work on. And then like Deb said, I also have the pleasure of working with the Rochester Museum and Science Center on their 2024 Eclipse Festival called Rock the Eclipse. All right, so today we're going to go over a few different items rather quickly. What is involved when planning large scale events? What are the different hats people wear, which is the bulk of the talk? What do you need to consider when hiring outside event experts like myself? How do you stand out to those potential sponsors, which is really my specialty in large scale event planning? And then what do you need to do to prepare? So what is involved in planning large scale events? Of course, you have your event basics, right? You have the day, the time, if you're going to do it indoors, outdoors, both. And then you also have your target market. So are you looking to have a family-friendly event? Are you looking to have it be more of a party for younger adults? Or are you making it a more relaxing occasion for the older demographic? Then from there, you have your eclipse basics, which to many of us in this room might seem a little obvious, but where are people going to view the eclipse from where you are? So back home in Rochester, we have to take into consideration, okay, there's trees, but those trees are not going to have leaves, or this parking lot is in a perfect spot, but there's a building in the way. So just the basics there. And then how are you going to make sure it's communicated to everyone as far as eye safety goes, when they're putting the glasses on, when they're taking them off? How are they getting those glasses? And of course, transportation. So that part of it, Deb and Dan kind of already covered, but in Rochester, we're encouraging Take Tuesday too. So not everyone is trying to drive out of the city all at once. Then you have your surrounding events. So again, around us, we have a lot of different museums. So within a mile or two radius, we have the Rochester Museum and Science Center, the George Eastman Museum, and the Memorial Art Gallery. So how do we stand out from each other while also partnering together? And for us, we're right now looking in the process of even sharing transportation, since we're all kind of on the same street, not only to help our visitors, but to help other safety plans. And then if you're used to indoor events, other things to consider, right, for an outdoor event. So again, that's parking. You're probably going to be using your on-site parking for event purposes. So where are you going to have visitors, staff, volunteers park? Then your permits. So if you're, again, not used to doing outdoor events, there's different permits you need. There's the event insurance, there's liquor license, et cetera, which we'll get a little bit more into. And then rentals, tents, chairs, staging, sound, all of that good stuff. And of course, the weather, the one thing we can't control. Here, it might be a little too hot for everyone. Back home, could be snowing, but fingers crossed. And secrets to success. So as my good friend Deb Ross would say, pick a sexy name. It doesn't have, you don't need any other details other than the name, the date, the location. Those details can come later on. But pick a name, promote it, and get people to talk about it. And of course, while you're doing that, make sure to engage, educate, and share your passion. Okay, so the different hats that people wear. This is split into 10 different committees of some sort. This is usually how we do it for like the Cornhill Arts Festival, for instance. These committees can be changed into a variety of different ways, so you can kind of choose what applies to you. But briefly to go over those, first we have the administrative side of things. So this person looks at the budget. They can make their realistic budget and then their dream budget, let's say. They look into the permits that I mentioned, the insurance, and then they also research grants. So how can you get more support for your event and make it that wow factor? Entertainment, kind of self-explanatory, but they get the speakers involved, the live music involved. They do the contracting for those people. And then they carry out those needs the day of. So any production or extra staging, again, especially for those outdoor events. Then you have food and beverage. So for those of you who aren't used to doing large scale events, you want a variety of food vendors. This person is working on contracting those food vendors, figuring out what is needed. Do they need electricity? Do they need generators, ice, and making sure those needs are met. And then if you do decide to have alcohol at your event, this person is applying for the liquor license and as well working with the distributor to make sure you have the proper product on site. Health, safety, and transportation, this can be a million different responsibilities. So this is something you could definitely split up amongst a lot of people. This is your emergency planning. So working with the police department, with EMT to come up with that plan and make sure everyone's on the same page. They also look into security. So having not only day of security, but overnight security to make sure that everything is in place, especially if you have sponsors or vendors coming to set up with expensive equipment and they're going to be leaving it overnight. And then, like I said, they would oversee the shuttles and parking we already kind of discussed. And of course, the safety and ADA accessibility for all attendees. Marketing, this is pretty straightforward, but this is crucial to promoting the event, right? So you have your website, your social media, photography, signage. Some places choose to have an app that would be under marketing as well. Moving on to merchandise. So if you're part of a museum or something of that sort that already has a gift store, they will probably take on this responsibility. If not, you would need someone to oversee this. They would order any of the Eclipse branded merchandise you need, price it out, and then have a team to sell those items the weekend of. They could also be in charge of working with a poster artist to secure the poster or getting those volunteer t-shirts to make sure your volunteers really stand out and can help attendees. Partnerships, again, we'll go a little bit more into this, but this person is in charge of securing those sponsorships, not only monetary, but in kind, which is just as equally as important to the success of an event. And then making sure those commitments are fulfilled leading up to and during the event. Site management is another one that could go into 5 different directions. This person not only oversees the rentals for events, but they also are looking at vendor placement. They're working with the vendors on load-in times, load-out times, making sure that's as flawless as possible. So not only your attendees have a great time, but the vendors leave saying, wow, that was really organized. And then they also look into fencing needs, electric needs, sanitation. So your porta potties, your recycling bins, garbages, etc. Ticketing, this could be on its own, or you could put it with admin or marketing. This person is in charge of deciding, working with the team to decide if you're going to have tickets for sale, if it's going to be just general admission, and then making sure that's carried out pre-event and during the event. Lastly, we have volunteer management. So if you don't think you have a large enough staff to do this, that's when you have a volunteer management person come in. Not only will they recruit volunteers for you, but then they will get their availability and schedule those volunteers out accordingly. All right, so what do you need to consider when hiring an outside event expert? Of course, I can stand here and say that I think you should hire someone like me, but I realize that's not realistic for everyone. So the first thing is really talking to your internal team. What does your internal team already have on their plate? What big events or projects or deadlines do they already have that may overlap with planning a large scale event? You want to be respectful of their time and make sure that you're on the same page as them. And when you're hiring an outside expert, they don't need to do everything from A to Z. Let's say your weakness might be sponsorships. You would bring in someone to do sponsorships, or staging and production. You could bring someone in just for that. It doesn't need to be the whole entire event. And then how do you stand out and grab the attention of sponsors? So first, decide what makes you different. What makes you different from the event that's happening 2 miles down the road or 10 miles. From there, develop an engaging sponsorship packet, which I do have an example of on the next page. And one of the important things is if you have an advancement team, meet with them before reaching out to anyone. So understand who your current partnerships are, who potential leads may be, or who your competitors are. So if you work really closely with a large bank in the area and you first go to that bank's competitor, you're ruining that long-term relationship and you don't want to be doing that. So always talk to someone who knows those partnerships and can assist with that. And then reach out to those leads, get them excited. We're all here because we're passionate about this, but not everyone knows all the facts or why this is so important or how many visitors are coming to the area. So get them educated, get them excited, and make them passionate as well. And then from there, listen to what they say. So ask them questions. What does a typical sponsorship look like for you? What do you value? What benefits do you want to see? And sometimes have that uncomfortable conversation. What is your budget? You don't want to present them with a $50,000 sponsorship when realistically they're looking at $5,000. This right here is just an example of what we're using at the RMSC to kind of engage them. Instead of providing 20 different sponsorship options, we're listening to what they have to say, making a packet, and then giving them a few options to choose from, making sure they have educated information to go off of. And then lastly, what do you need to do to prepare? So I have about 2 minutes left, but this QR code, or if you go to galloeventagency.com/eclipse, this not only leads you to the presentation today, but it also has a Google sheet with just a basic level checklist of what you should be doing when planning a large scale event. Again, to event planners, it might seem a little obvious, but you're welcome to use that Google sheet. If you just go to File, make a copy, you can tailor it to fit your event needs and then go from there. So thank you, everyone, and I look forward to meeting and talking to you soon.
Thank you so much, Jen. And I'll take the opportunity to remind everyone that all of these presentations, as well as the recordings, will be available within the next couple of weeks for attendees to go and review. So yeah, and as well as Jen's checklist. Okay, up next, we have our Sweetwater folks, if I'm not mistaken.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tia Weiss with Main Street America and part of the presentation with the Sweetwater folks. So I'm here with my colleague Liz Schenk, also of Main Street America, and 15 of our In the Path of Totality grantees. I'll wait. Well, I can talk as they. Okay. Yep, as I mentioned, I'm with Main Street America. And I'm so excited to be here with all of you today. As I mentioned, I'm here with 15 of our In the Path of Totality Main Street communities, a program that we're doing. Thank you. In partnership with the Simons Foundation. Okay, there we go. So Main Streets are communities and cities all across the country. For over 40 years, Main Street America has supported towns and cities to revitalize their downtowns and historic districts. We have a network of over 1,500 neighborhoods and communities in rural and urban places who are all working on preservation-based economic development strategies using the Main Street 4-point approach. And Main Street is a subsidiary of the National Trust for Historic Preservation. That network that we have also consists of states and in some cases, county and city level coordinating programs, those individual communities and many others. So I won't spend too much time on this, but through the Main Street America 4-point approach, we offer practical, adaptable frameworks for downtowns and commercial districts to go through transformation strategies, all based in community-based initiatives. Those communities start with a community vision and market understanding. And then they go through different points, part of which is organization and promotion, a lot of which it manifests in the kinds of things that you've seen today, promoting downtowns, promoting events, hosting events, but doing that from a base of being organized as a community. And then on the flip side of the transformation strategies that are ongoing, we're constantly measuring outcomes. Those communities know the results of their events and what it is that they're doing. And so through this approach, it helps them get started and it helps them grow as they go along in the approach. But overall, it results in communities and places and spaces where people love to gather, where people like to work, play, and do business. Main Street leaders take lots of different forms. Sometimes they lead nonprofit organizations. Sometimes they lead city programs. They might be embedded in the city or the county's tourism department. But overall, they're really working in ways and working together with others to just make really amazing things happen. In some instances, it may be very few staff, but many, many stakeholders involved and many, many, many volunteers leveraged to put things together. They work really hard, again, at making great local places overall, again, transforming what their downtowns and communities look like, but also creating really, really wonderful experiences for local residents and tourists alike. And so in the path of the total solar eclipse, there are over 100 designated Main Street communities, but then that larger network that I mentioned is also within that path of totality. So there's very likely a Main Street community in somewhere near you. And so again, as I mentioned, those Main Street staff and volunteers and stakeholders really do produce results, measurable results. And you can see there 1.5 million volunteer hours is what we've counted over the years in working with folks. Really does take a lot of people to put things together and the local leadership of the Main Street individuals. And so here's some of our Main Street America values. Again, we're very inclusive, focused on the future community preservation base, but also supporting small for greater impact. And then something you'll hear a little bit more about. Again, we're working on this in the Path of Totality grant program, but also communities are already and looking forward to more engaging with science on Main Street throughout the year. And so with that, I'll turn it over to my colleagues to hear from a real Main Street district.
Hi, while they're switching to the other PowerPoint for Sweetwater, my name is Jessica Morgan. I'm with the city of Sweetwater, Tennessee. Although sometimes we do get calls about the windmills, and that's when we know they're talking about Texas. We're like, wrong state. It's the other team. This is Haley Isbell. I am actually the finance director for Sweetwater. Haley is the tourism director. Kate Russo, you are a rock star, and we use your community guide in planning our 2017 eclipse. And we're so excited to be in a conference with you now. Put a face with your name. You are awesome. Okay, so everybody's had trouble with this clicker. It'll probably take me a second. This is in downtown Sweetwater. So to start off, we're just telling you to come to our session next, and we'll go into deeper detail on this. But we want you all to know that we are a town of 6,000 people. Me, Haley, and one other coworker put the Eclipse Festival together. Okay, we didn't hire anybody. We didn't have any special designated people to do this. It was an all hands on deck kind of situation. We did have 18 months heads up. So we've been planning it for 18 months. So the time was our advantage, and we got early on some things that made a lot of people come, but that was our downtown on August 21st, 2017. We had 2 minutes and 37 seconds of totality. Oh, wrong way. Okay, so here's our little quaint downtown. We had 25,000 people come to downtown Sweetwater on the day of the eclipse. Now, I will tell you, we had a festival starting on Friday, and it went all the way through Monday, because ours was on a Monday, just like the April one's gonna be. We had around 50,000 countywide. For a town of 6,000 people, it's a big deal to have 25,000 people drive into your town. All of them left at the same time. It took 6 hours for people to get from us to the nearest airport 45 minutes away. And every one of them posted, it was worth it. And we still have those posts up there, okay? We found out through the most, okay, remember, this is 2017, so that was 1,000,000 years ago in internet age, okay? Haley's gonna talk a little bit about that with her marketing. You'll see, we didn't have good posters like you all have. We had visitors from all 50 states and 39 countries because we had them sign in on a book and tell us where they were from. And then we also had some maps downtown where they put push pins in. Dumb us took the picture halfway through the day instead of right after totality, because then the map was totally covered, but that's the picture we have, and it doesn't nearly show all of them. But for our breakout session, we want people who are hosting eclipse events, any, of course, Main Street America groups, because we're a Main Street and we incorporate that into our session a little bit. It's targeted for community planners and Main Street communities and people who enjoy fun, because we're fun. Y'all may not learn a thing. We are the dumbest people in this room, right? We are 100% sure about that. There is no PhD after either of our names, but you will have fun at our session. Kind of the format that we're going to go through, we're going to do a bunch of pro tips. Some things we did and we did well, and some things we did and we didn't do so well. And we know you can do it better because you're getting a better heads up than we had. Again, it's practical planning, nuts and bolts stuff about what we did that day, how we handled traffic. We posted videos on our Facebook page ahead of time to show people the paths in, the multiple routes in. Also, we had Google Maps that they could download and print ahead of time because internet is an issue. So we'll talk about that too. How to incorporate this event into your Main Street work plan and your goals, but also any other work plan that your community has in your goals. Haley, take it over.
Okay. Well, like Jessica said, I'm Haley Isbell. I'm the tourism director for the city of Sweetwater, and we're very impressed and jealous that number one, you all have all these resources that we wish we had, and two, that you're getting to do this again if you're in the path of totality, because we're not. But we will talk in the session about branding, and this is something that's been touched on numerous times today, but how important your brand is, not only for now and all the advertising you're doing now, but also for later, because that's what people are going to remember you by years down the road. And that's a picture of our back of our shirts. I blacked out for 2 minutes and 37 seconds in Sweetwater, Tennessee. And that is what we were known for. So we'll talk about the impact of branding and what makes this different from your normal festival as far as pretty much everything. Even the attendees, they're different from your normal festival attendees, and you will love them because they are wonderful. And of course, the importance of totality. We will also highlight children. This is a great learning experience for kids, teaching them about science, what happens in the eclipse, all the activities that you can do to engage the youth in the community, different fundraising and business development opportunities that will affect you even after the eclipse, logistics, traffic, garbage. I'm so glad this has been brought up multiple times today, porta potties, and also streetlights, because we had to get with our local utility board to make sure our streetlights did not come on in downtown and
She said we need to get with our local utility board. She's not kidding. She slept with a guy at the utility board to get him to deactivate the solar panels to where those lights would not come on during totality. She is the most dedicated employee I've ever had. Note for the Zoom visitors, she is married to the guy that does that at the utility board. And they have 3 beautiful children together.
now y'all know so much about me. Thank you, Jessica. But yes, so getting the street lights to where they don't come on, it doesn't ruin the experience. Rural is king for the eclipse. We are firm believers in the fact that the smaller your community is, the more impact you can have and a great experience can be had. You don't have to be a big city to have a wonderful experience of the eclipse. So rural is king. We'll go over that. Look at our buddy Chuck up there. Our city planner at the time holding that sign. He was thrilled to be doing that, but we're happy to help you learn from our mistakes. We're happy to, in our session, lend you our experiences. And like Jessica said, we're fun. So we're going to make sure you have a good time and laugh a lot. And then I think that's all of ours, right? Okay, that covers us. So thank you.
Yeah, I know. I just gotta follow that.
Oh.
It's a great photo. And now it's time for Ben. So sorry. I can't do what they do. I don't know. But I've seen a lot of people super energized like you two are around just events of all sorts over the past, I don't know, 15 years or so that I've been the manager of the Science Festival Alliance. I'm also the manager of experimental practice at the MIT Museum. So I've seen this weird crash of science and community coming together at events and how that's played out in cities, towns, rural areas, and everything in between across the US, Canada, and abroad for a while. That's my perspective. I also know that there's a lot of perspectives here and a really wide range of experience. So it's very hard to speak to you all because I don't know, I can't possibly give you the rubber hits the road is the name of the session. I'm like, I couldn't give it like one nugget of information that's going to like hit all of you the same way. So what I want to do is I think that there's just a little sense of like, I want to just get us all on the same page of what public science events can look like. So I think I'm pretty clear that I'm talking to an audience right now that understands it's not just a lecture and we've moved on from that. I got that. I did a little exercise where I gave myself 5 minutes to just quickly write down all the venues I could think of where I've seen public science events. And I did that in 5 minutes. We're not going to spend 5 minutes doing this, but there's a list here. And we can maybe unpack some of these things in our workshop later as they're pitching for. And maybe have questions about some of those. Oh, yeah, there's some things on there. It's true. Those are all true. That's just what I came up with in 5 minutes. And then I did the same exercise where we're like, well, what are science event scenarios? So what are people doing in those? Or what are the kinds of scenes or settings that I've seen public science events take place in. And so we're all on the same page. It's a long list. You've seen a lot of long lists in this Rubber Hits the Road 2-part session. The list of community partners, everyone under the sun. Well, the font was small. So we are agreed about that. Now I'm going to make it's really gates are wide open, it can be anything. I'm going to make it stupid simple. And say, well, we've got science, we've got community, and when they meet, you can have an event. And that's about as dumb as I can make it. But there's something to be said, which I would like to belabor a little bit more in our session later about what kind of assumptions we have on which side. And also what happens with that bang. So if you got your particle physicist hat on, you know, the collider happens, and then particles spin out all different directions. I've been to too many of these things, to too many events to just say that they're great. I mean, the honest version is that some horrible things come out of this explosion sometimes. Things that I'm ashamed of and I'm embarrassed about, and I just want to say, stop, stop, stop. It's true. So we need to talk about that. Don't quite have enough time now, and I feel like I really brought you all down. There's also some amazing things, but if you're going to do amazing things, you have to be really intentional. In order to be really intentional, we have to all get on the same page about one thing: event organizing is a craft. Okay, I want to talk about this for hours. I want to like sit down with you and do a whole like dissertation defense. I don't have a PhD, but you know, like you guys, I aspire to be somewhere in the room somehow, and I'd love to unpack all these four. We're not going to make it too rough in the next session, but I'm going to touch on each of these four. Let's just make sure we understand this. Events must work as events first before they can achieve any other goals, and you may all agree, but I want you to be able to articulate that going forward, that events must work as events first. So a lot of you come from that science arrow or are embedded within institutions that have that science arrow pushing you forward, and you've got your mission, you've got your agenda. That has to take a back seat to your craft. So if you're a science journalist, your craft is journalism. So it has good science journalism works as journalism first. If you're making science documentaries, you are a documentarian. It has to work as a good documentary in order to work as a science documentary. So your priority has to be to the craft that you're operating within. The more you can be intentional about that and aware of it. And if you're not that person, to be supportive and understanding and nice to those who are embedded within that craft and trying to work within a craft, the more likely you're going to get towards those good outcomes versus the ones that we just kind of pretend aren't happening. There's more to say here. I just want to rush along because I want to get the question and answer. The medium of events is the shared social experience is to me an insight that like it took me a while to get to. What comes from and flows from a shared social experience, and how do you work with that as your canvas and your paints, or your camera and your film, or your pen and your paper as your medium. And also skilled organizers know how to make the most of these opportunities and constraints, which is basically saying like, well, if event organizing is a craft, then actually event organizers know some things. And I'd love to talk about this more too. They're never just a flash in the pan. When you look at what it takes, the process of organizing an event is almost always, it's very hard to think of in any kind of scenario where the event organizing doesn't take far longer than the actual event itself. And yet that's completely unseen by most people. It's just, well, those that happen to be there or the administrators who are looking over it, they just say, oh, wow, well, that was fantastic. Yeah, well, the entire process leading up to it, that counts too. And it's great to be intentional about that and make that count too. I could go on. I'm not going to, I want to move quickly. We want to directly involve scientists whenever possible. Now our evaluations from several years of studying festivals has shown that the most positive outcomes and the most likely and the greatest likelihood of positive outcomes for things like science learning or even behavior change around science awareness are related to whether somebody has a face-to-face interaction with a scientist. The more kinds of face-to-face interactions they can have with a scientist, the better. And that's amazing news. but it's also, anybody who's done this in practice knows there's a huge caveat of be careful. And we could talk about that at greater length for if people are interested in figuring out more about how to work directly with scientists. Event organizing can be transformative for those who do it. And I think because we're all here, that means you. If we're now on the same page that event organizing is a craft, and that there's maybe there's some, if not profound things that flow from it, there's some useful realizations of just acknowledging the simple basic truth and carrying it forward. The other takeaway that I like is to get us all on the same page and realize that most of us are now public science event organizers. And if you still feel like an outsider in that way, after April 8th, you're on board. So welcome, and you're not alone. We're not alone. At experimentalpractice.org, I have a list of portfolio projects I'm working on. Many of them are related to stitching together networks of public science event organizers. So you may find your flock there. I'm not going to push it too hard. There's many other places you may find your flock, but it's a craft. That means that there's others out there doing this. There are other reference points, and you don't have to be alone. And that transformation towards understanding yourself in that way means that after April 8th, God willing, all of us in this room will also wake up on April 9th, and the Main Street communities will still be there. And, the community you work in will still be there. All the amazing relationships you've developed leading up to the eclipse will still be there, and you'll still be there. And so I'm very interested in keeping our eyes, just one eye, a little bit on like, well, and so where's this all going for you? And that's what, maybe we can talk about it later, maybe not, but I hope that helps.
Before I bring Ian up real quick. So, what Ben just said is actually really encapsulates what we are doing essentially is creating hundreds of thousands of eclipse stories, right? By doing all of this organizing, we're helping everybody who's going to be in the path craft their own eclipse story. And for them, it's a day or 3 minutes and 38 seconds or what, that's how they're going to see it. But for all of us in this community, we've been crafting this story, some of you for a decade, since before the 2017 eclipse, but I've been doing it, since 2017, helping. So it's a 7-year plus 3 minutes and 38 seconds plus 128 years or 120 years until the next eclipse in Rochester. So think of your story is all of this plus those moments. Okay, next up, let's some practical tips for astrophotography.
Cool. Hello. Let me adjust this real quick. Perfect. All right. Hey, everybody. My name is Ian Lauer. So I am an astrophotographer. What does that mean? I take pictures of space, including eclipses, and I'm super excited to photograph the upcoming eclipse. So accommodating astrophotographers at eclipses. What do you do? Well, obviously, you have to have a limo pick them up. You got to have the red carpet roll out, doves come out when they come. I'm just kidding. I was really thinking about this really hard. What are the things that are important? And obviously the impact on the community, creating a new era of astrophotographers, supporting them, doing all those types of things. But really no, it doesn't like that. There we go. I really thought, why should we support them? Why should we support these folks who are taking these pictures? Why is that important? And I thought really long and hard about it. And it came to me that it was right in front of me. It's the photos that they take. The photos are what are important. Here are some of the most iconic photos of eclipses. And when we see these, for me, it reminds me, as somebody who has seen an eclipse before, all of the emotions that I felt when the temperature dropped, when we saw the diamond ring effect, the feeling we had when we were surrounded by people enjoying this moment together. All of those feelings come rushing back when I see these types of photos. And for newcomers who've never seen one before, when they see photos like this, to them, it inspires them to go out and see an eclipse. It makes them want to feel that same feeling they get when we look at these astrophotos. And so see, these are some of the most iconic ones. And of course, I wouldn't be a photographer if I didn't use this opportunity to show off my own photos. So the first three are incredible. And then there's mine down here in the bottom right. So why is it important? So to me, that is the most important part, is the photos that come from it. Because after the event's done, after everybody goes home, what's left is the photos that carry on for a long, long time. I mean, the photo in the top right here, this one from Albuquerque, I mean, that's an awesome photo. That was from 2012, and they still use that photo today on like NASA's website when they talk about eclipses. So I mean, a photo from 2012 still going and making its rounds through the internet, and it always goes viral every year, somebody posting that on social media. And I just love that. I love all these photos. It inspires me and makes me super excited for the upcoming eclipse, and I hope it does for you too. So the other things that matter for accommodating astrophotographers, well, developing the relationships with these photographers. You're getting photographers who are top tier talent, and they're traveling from all over the globe to come to this event. That's a huge opportunity to take advantage of, to develop that relationship with them, because they have such huge networks. And when you create these partnerships with the photography talent that you're getting, it creates future opportunities. Photographers love coming back to places to do workshops. And when they see photos, or when you see photos of an eclipse from the town that you were in experiencing it, it just makes it that much more special. So for me, when I see the photo from Wyoming, I know I took it, but it reminds me, whenever I see other photographers and their work, when they took an eclipse photo from Wyoming, it takes me back to that moment. And again, I think that's really, really special. Now, the community impact. You're bringing these astrophotographers to your town. I mean, they're going to be there whether you like it or not, because this is a once in a lifetime event for a lot of people. But to me, astrophotography is the ultimate intersection of science and art. And so being able to utilize astrophotographers, their photos, and their knowledge can help grow a STEM interest in people who might not have had that. So people who seem to shy away from science might actually become interested in science because of the art aspect of astrophotography, and vice versa. And we'll go through these. So again, here, one of the coolest examples I have is in the bottom left here. This is a photo of a 12-year-old. His name is William. And he is a 12-year-old who took a photo of a galaxy using a remote telescope. We live in an era where we can now have the tools. We have all these tools available to us to take these types of photos that somebody, even a 12-year-old, can take photos that no one ever thought they could take. And so utilizing this kind of stuff will really help inspire the next generation of artists, astrophotographers, scientists, all of that. And then I had to show my wife here on the right. She's a space artist. So she paints huge space murals, and we like to collaborate, and I'll take photos and she'll paint them. It's good fun. Okay, so we're all astrophotographers here because we all have one of these things in our pockets. We got phones, and everyone's going to want to take pictures. Everyone's want to live stream. Everyone's want to try and get a photo. I'm not sponsored by any of these brands, but the one on the right is a company called Spectrum, and they actually make a lens that goes over your camera lens. So you can get a zoomed in view of the sun, and you can put a solar filter on it. So you can actually get some pretty cool results. Here are some results that people have gotten with that for a solar eclipse. And on the photo on the left here is a photo of me in Wyoming, and we're live streaming the solar eclipse, which is super awesome. But then you also have to think about, well, she's live streaming us. That means someone had to take a photo of her live streaming us while we're watching this. So again, cell phones are everywhere. And now today, everyone's going to have a cell phone. So everyone's going to want to take photos. So one of the big opportunities we have here is to actually teach other photographers how to take these types of photos. And so one of the things that I do is I do workshops. I teach people how to take astrophotos, Milky Way and deep space, things like that. But there are a lot of other photographers within your communities who would love to teach other people how to take photos like that. And so a great opportunity would be to collaborate with experienced photographers, create workshops for people within your community so they can learn how to take these photos. Or you can also work with people online. As an astrophotographer, I'll tell you, I absolutely love teaching people this stuff. And I guarantee you, if you reach out to an astrophotographer that you see on Instagram or Twitter or whatever they call it now, or TikTok or whatever, they are going to want to teach people. And so that's a great opportunity. Just reach out to some photographers that you love. You see their work, you're like, you know, we would love to do a digital seminar with you. We'd love to show people, you know, how do you take those photos? They would love to teach people that. Trust me, they love sharing their knowledge. That's one of the cool things about astrophotography. It's a small community that's constantly growing, especially with technology coming up and coming. And they love teaching other people to learn how to do this stuff. And so hands-on workshops, as I was saying, and digital seminars are really important. And so these two lovely ladies over here had this idea for their event where you actually have a dedicated area for photographers to take photos. I can't tell you how many times people have had problems with, they call it picking the tripod, where you have your setup, totality's coming, there's 8 seconds, you're getting ready, take that photo. And then there's some excitement right next to you and someone gives you the little, and your camera just goes whoop, and you miss the shot. We want to avoid that. And photographers are very aware of their surroundings. They don't want that to happen to them, and they don't want to be the one doing the kicking. So if you have an area where they can, you know, take photos and be away from the crowds, that would be perfect for them. That's a great way to accommodate them, because then they can create those photos that inspire us all. And this one, I had in my head somebody running up and just panicking like 10 minutes before it happens. They're like, my SD card is corrupted, or my battery ran out and I forgot my charger. If you have an event where you can have a local photography shop that has the spare equipment, you will be a lifesaver. I'll tell you, every event I've ever done, whether it's an eclipse event or just any other event, there's always something you forget. You're traveling, and I mean, some people forget their camera lens. And if you have a photography store that has all of those things available, you will be a lifesaver, especially all the small little parts that we forget about. So for bigger events, you can work with big brands, Sony, Nikon, all of these companies are happy to send representatives out. You can work on deals with them to, hey, you guys do workshops for us and you get a booth here so you can sell your stuff, sell your equipment. And you can do for smaller events, people who do tripods or solar filters. There are tons and tons and tons of photography companies that are willing to send people out to do these types of events. Also because they like to go out and have an excuse to see an eclipse for themselves. And I just wanted to end this with the types of equipment you might run into. So some of you here are probably familiar with a lot of this equipment. And I just wanted to show the equipment you might see and the results you would get. So on the left-hand side is, you'll see a lot of these white light filters. It's like the Mylar film, and they just go over the camera lens, and you get these nice, you get the ability to see sunspots, and you can view the solar eclipse. And what happens is when totality hits, what you do is you take your filter off, and you can take photos like that. But then once the sun comes out of totality, you have to put that lens back on. But that's the technique that photographers will be doing. Again, the kicked tripod, oh my gosh, that would be devastating for some people. And then there are dedicated, what they call hydrogen alpha telescopes, some of you might be familiar with, where you can actually start to see the granulation on the surface of the sun. And this was actually our setup in Wyoming in 2017. And we got some nice eclipse photos. Again, I'm a photographer. I got to show you some of my photos, right? And then some of my favorites are some of my friends who are taking incredible, incredible astro photos using this equipment. These are stunning photos that are being taken. Some of these, they use what's called a Daystar Quark, and it's a piece of equipment that just goes between your lens or your telescope and your camera. And again, these are amateur astronomers and astrophotographers that are taking these types of photos. So it's not NASA that's taking these. These are photographers taking these types of photos. And so you can expect people wanting to get photos like that at your events. So that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions too here or afterwards about photography or planning workshops or things like that. But just remember that it's the photos that inspire us for years to come after the event, especially the ones that we saw earlier. I love those ones. Anyways, I could talk about all the photos forever, but I won't. Thank you so much.
Rick let's start the questions with a couple that are online. Rick says there are a few.
Thank you. Yes, a couple of questions that were in the chat from Lori Radow, who's actually a member of our task force, but wasn't able to come. These are for the Sweetwater folks. Actually, I think the first one its time may have passed. Let me give you the second one. How much did the Tennessee Department of Transportation work with you regarding keeping the traveling public informed? I asked as you shared that everyone left at the same time, which resulted in a 6-hour backup.
Oh, I wish I could tell you we coordinated a lot with TDOT. I held a regional meeting and invited our TDOT people. That was the one and only time I saw them. And that was about 8 months beforehand. 2 days before our event, they put up traffic counters. And that was our coordination with TDOT. We are right off an interstate, I-75, which in Sweetwater is the midpoint between Ohio and Florida. So I-75 is heavily traveled anyway. So we did have good infrastructure in place for transportation. Unfortunately, our state Department of Transportation was a little behind the ball on this, which I don't think will be the case for your all states. I think they're more aware they've heard about a total solar eclipse in their lifetime. They're probably more aware for this 2024 one that's coming up. Even the state tourism department and state economic development didn't ever give us data on the impact of what the eclipse did. And Nashville was the largest metro city in the path, if I'm not mistaken, last time. So you would have thought that would have been something they would have been on top of. It just kind of snuck up on everybody. It would have snuck up on us if someone hadn't been reading a farmer's almanac and told us about it ahead of time. So I do think it's going to be so much better for you all that there's already such an awareness about it. And I mean, me and Haley have sat here all day going, why the hell wasn't this in place when we were planning a 2017 eclipse? We could have learned so much the easy way instead of the hard way, but not a lot of coordination with TDOT. People were very happy leaving though. I will say we did lots of public information stuff. Everybody that was coming, we kept telling them over and over, do not try and drive in at the same time. You're going to be sitting on the side of the road watching the eclipse if you do that. So they did a really good job of following instructions. We drove through town at 5 a.m. that morning going, oh my God, nobody's coming. They're going to run us out of town because nobody's coming. And then everybody showed up right before totality and they all left immediately after. So.
Thank you. And we have a question from Andrew Fracknoy, another member of our task force who wasn't able to be here today, but who will be presenting tomorrow. This was for Ian, and he does want you to drop some names. He wants to know the name brand of the lens and filter that allows those zoom images of the eclipse through your cell phone.
Yeah, that one was Spectrum Telescopes. I believe that's the brand. They're the ones who sell that combo pack. And I'm sure there's a bunch of other ones out there, but that's just the one I'm familiar with and I've used.
Okay, I think we can come to our crew here. So questions from our live audience? Can we actually pass a mic back that way again? Thank you.
My question is more of a warning. And that is this: you cannot be an event planner and an astrophotographer at the same time. Because trying to hold 400 people in check is like herding cats. And amongst these herding cats are little children that will come along and hit your telescope leg. And mine was set up with a computer to fire the cameras, and I was dealing with other stuff. And the frame is like here and the sun is like
Oh.
here.
I told you it's real, see?
Yeah.
It happens.
So be wary. You can't do event planning and astrophotos.
But
at
did the
same
kid
time.
have a good time?
Oh, I had a wonderful.
Okay. So the event organizing went well. That's a,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I had 3 cases of homemade beer, 16 bottles of homemade wine, and 20 bottles of homemade champagne that all went away after the eclipse.
We had a question over here, if you could run the mic. Where was it? Oh, here.
I'm seconding the idea of having a separate place for the professional photographers. And I say this because when I was researching a recent eclipse story, I talked to a woman who saw her first total solar eclipse in Mongolia a few years ago. And she was so excited. And as we have said, when totality hits, everybody started screaming and the photographers are going, shh. So I think it's a good idea to put the professional photographers in a separate place.
So I was just going to add, and we'll go over this more in depth with our session, but we did do that at our Eclipse Festival. And we had our photographers in our Parks and Recreation Complex. Actually, it was around our city pool, but there's a lot of grass there and it's fenced in and no kids were allowed to go in there. So the photographers did have to pay a fee to set up in there. And they also had to agree to let us forever use their images, which now hang in a lot of our downtown businesses and are still for sale. But we did do that and it was very helpful. And we've heard a lot of great feedback from photographers that that was, you know, an awesome thing. So.
Okay. I guess my question's a little bit to that. Like, so from an aesthetic standpoint, I understand you don't want obstructions and all of that stuff for your viewing area, but I don't know, how do they handle being told, like, this is where you're going to take the picture, whether you like it or not? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if I would want to be told that. I'm not a photographer, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
You probably could talk on it more as well, but from my perspective, if they want to have that security, then they'll be more than happy to go there. If they want to take the risk, they can take the risk of having the tripod kicked.
So I was actually going to follow up. I was in Columbia, Missouri for 2017, and the local folks set up different, and they were actually quite different locations for different audiences, and that worked really well. And it's exactly what you said, that if somebody didn't want to be in the location that was designated for photographers, so be it. But then it's their problem, and I think that's great. I also wanted to follow up on something that the Sweetwater lady said, because Laurie, who asked the question, and I had a Zoom meeting with someone from TXDOT. They basically told us that we didn't know what we were talking about and that they didn't need to worry. So I'm not convinced that, and this is Texas, where we're going to have the most people. I am not convinced that what you said about people being more prepared this time, maybe not. So just a warning.